Kažu ko rano rani, dvije sreće grabi, to sam davno nekad naučio. I I really want to thank you for being here on a Sunday morning. You have to be really, really motivated or you can't sleep. Either way, I'm going to try to make this as engaging and as entertaining as I possibly can. But before I do so, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself. This city, Sarajevo, which most of you call home, was my home once upon a time too. In fact, I was born here almost 50 years ago and have left in late 91 as an exchange student with the idea to go to US for a period of time, study, and then come back. And of course, the war has happened, and I did not come back. I stayed. And for the past 30 years plus, I have done many, many things on professional front. I studied environmental engineering, and after graduating, I joined one of the world's leading energy companies. The company that I work for today is called SLB, and it's formerly known as Schlumberger. I've been with them for the last 25 years, and during this time, I have had an opportunity to work in many, many parts of the world. Let's see. It's locked, okay. Just give us a second, please. I try. Okay. While they're doing this, let me introduce you to this concept of energy trilemma and what does it really mean and why is it important for us today and why is it going to be even more important for those of you that are Generation Z. It is going to be one of the greatest challenges that us humans are going to be facing and more importantly solving over the next several decades and potentially centuries to come. The energy trilemma basically looks after three very, very basic principles, all surrounding energy itself. The first one being energy security, in short, an access to energy. So here we are today, and we don't actually have that problem, right? Because there is energy all around us in form of electrical energy, which is powering this event. Okay. Ne znam. Okay. All right, so we're having a technical problem, so you're just going to have to listen to me. We will not be able to show you the presentation, but rest assured you'll learn something today. The second point in this whole energy trilemma story revolves around energy affordability, right? And that is actually a problem today for many, many people around the world, right? Because many are struggling to pay for it, right? Especially in Europe, in light of geopolitical events that have unfolded in Ukraine in the last couple of years, the cost of energy has gone up everywhere. In some parts of Western Europe, where I live today, it has gone up by 4 times, right? So that part of the energy trilemma is a real challenge. And then last but not the least is the story of energy sustainability or energy transition. It's a story of carbon, how much of a carbon we are putting out there, which in turn is warming the globe, which in turn is creating tremendous amount of challenges for humanity as a whole. Because there's a lot of fires, there's a lot of droughts, there's a lot of weather events which are causing massive migrations of people from parts of the world that are affected by it to those that are a little less affected. And obviously, all of this is creating a one massive challenge, which is the challenge of our generation. Before I move to the next slide, I do want to tell you about another thing. And you remember when I introduced the concept of energy accessibility or energy security, us in Europe take this for granted. We had it forever, right? However, there's many parts of the world that do not have access to the energy at all. In fact, 1 in 8 humans, about 1 billion people today, do not have access to electricity whatsoever. You take a continent like Africa, 43% of their population doesn't have it, right? So again, this is a real issue, it's a real challenge. Now, a little bit about my company. So we're a global technology company. We've been around for a very, very long time. In fact, for almost 100 years now. And what we do is we are basically a technology company which drives energy innovation. And why do we do it? We do it for a balanced planet. We have recently rebranded the company after many, many years. And the logo that you see here on the left, which is a fairly simple logo, basically represents the journey and ambition that we have as a company over the next several decades. And that is to be a net zero company by the year 2050. And what does it mean to be a net zero? It means that emissions that we are going to be emitting from our day-to-day operations, and I'll talk a little bit about our day-to-day operations here shortly, will be completely offset by the other things that we're going to be doing on technology front in order not to be emitters of the CO2 and methane in particular. So let's talk a little bit about the company's history. It all started in part of France called Alsace. Alsace region is right on the border between France and Germany. Two brothers, Conrad and Marcel Schlumberger, have asked their father in early 1920s to give them a $5,000 grant, which in today's money it's approximately about $90,000, so they can perform experiments using electrical current and to use electrical current to measure the properties of subsurface beneath us. They had a strong belief that every different piece of geology has a unique signature when electrical current is passed through it, and that that signature can later be then interpreted in order to determine what it is, where it is, and in what quantities is it there. Their journey was extremely successful from a get-go, and within the first 10 to 15 years, they have set up a global operations around the world, which in a context of the time, we are talking here between World War I and World War II, this was actually quite extraordinary for a small family French firm to have set up operations in places like North America, in places like Asia. So it was extremely, extremely successful from the get-go. Over the years, they started experimenting with other things. And they started introducing the concepts of acoustics, the concepts of seismic exploration, the concepts of using radioactive elements, the magnetic resonance, and things of this nature, all with aim to help their customers, which were the oil and gas companies, to find and produce the oil. Over the years, this has obviously evolved into something very, very large. And today, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about an offshore oil and gas exploration and extraction. And what we are seeing here is a typical offshore oil field. And one of the first things that you can actually, I would say, deduce from this picture is that it's very large, it's very complicated, it has many moving pieces. Now, before you can actually reach the reservoir, in offshore environment, you have to go through the water, right? And that water depth can vary anywhere from 50 meters all the way down to 2,500 meters, right? So this is before you can even start drilling, exploring, producing. You have to deal with this, right? The infrastructure you have to have on top, offshore platforms, offshore rigs, FPSOs, things of this nature are extremely, extremely expensive. A drilling rig can cost you up to $500,000 US a day to operate. And to drill an average offshore well can take you anywhere from 100 days up to 200 days, right? So you can easily do the math, and the average offshore well can cost you anywhere from $50 to $100 million on average, but there have been some that have costed a lot more than that. Now, the bits and pieces that you see in blue is where SLB or Schlumberger plays in, okay? It's important to note that we do not own the reservoir, we do not own gas stations, we do not own the boats or the platforms that are used for this exploitation. However, what we do own is all the technology that goes inside of these systems, as well as services, predominantly engineering services that are required for you to actually successfully find it and then eventually safely bring it to the surface. We are currently divided in 4 divisions. One is called digital and integration. The second one is reservoir performance. The third is production system. And last but not the least is the well construction one. And that's where my business plays in. And more specifically, what we do is we do drilling services. We provide cementing of the wells in place. We provide all the fluids and chemistry required to bring the drilling cuttings safely up to the surface, as well as to ensure that the wellbore stability of this whole construction project is basically intact. Now, we are a very large company. We operate in 120 countries globally. We have over 100,000 employees. They are very, very diverse workforce from 170 countries, including Bosnia, obviously. And our heritage is almost 100 years old now. We are also listed on New York Stock Exchange. We've been listed there since early 60s, and our current market cap is approximately $75 billion. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career, which is unique in some respects, but also quite common. We as a company believe in moving people around. We believe in giving people opportunities, exposing them not just to the different geographical and business environments, but also to the different functions. I started as an engineer. Coming out of university, I went through a training school, and for the first 6 months, I was called a junior field engineer. For the first 5 years of my career, I worked as a field engineer. And during this time, I followed various projects, both on land and in offshore environments. And these are the 5 countries that I've covered at the time, which was US, Brazil, Malaysia, China, and Indonesia. Every one of these experiences brought something different, right? Because while technology for the most part was quite the same, at the same time there were many things that were different, right? The customer base was different, the culture in which I was living and working was obviously completely different, and that obviously brings tremendous amount of opportunity for learning and growing. After that, I moved to Nigeria in a role of a field service manager, and this is where I got my first taste of basically managing a group of engineers, right? So basically I moved from being in a field to be in the office for the very first time and managing the group of engineers that each of them would have their own projects. After Nigeria, I moved to Russia, to Siberia in fact, where I was running an operations in a large part of Western Siberia. From there, I had a couple of functional jobs, one in human resources and another one in health, safety, environment. And those 2 jobs were respectively in France and US. Then I moved up another level to the role of the vice president, running the different business lines, and those jobs were in Moscow, Paris, and Houston respectively. Obviously, 3 different assignments, 3 different places with 3 different divisions. And last but not the least, most recently, I've been looking after the well construction division for what's referred to offshore Atlantic region, which covers Europe, Africa, and Americas, and I am London-based. Some of the photos that you see here are photos, I would say, that have been taken throughout my career. So the one at the very bottom left is when I was a young field engineer. So I am the guy on the right. This was taken on US-Mexico border. I was about 25 years old at the time. The one you see with the snow in the background, this is Yamal Peninsula, which is one of the largest gas-producing regions in the world, which is in Russia. The one in the middle with the helicopter in the background, that was taken in Brazil on one of the Petrobras drilling platforms. The one with a whole bunch of snow and rig in the background was recently taken in Alaska on one of the world's largest extended reach drilling projects. The one to the very far right was with my team in Mexico, probably a few months ago, and the one in the top right-hand corner was taken recently in Congo in Africa, where we were reopening one of our operational bases. Now, our company is very, very unique in many ways. And there are 3 basic principles that we utilize when it comes to development of people. The first one is something what we are referring to as borderless careers. Okay, and as you have seen from the example that I have given you all before, that's exactly what it means, right? There are no borders. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want it, as long as there's a business need. We recruit where we work. We very much promote diversity and inclusion. And last but not the least, the careers could be beyond limits. Many of us do join with university degrees, some with masters, some with PhDs, but also we have a lot of people that have joined our company with just a high school degree. And believe it or not, they have managed to make it to the levels that I'm on now today, and some of them even higher. So this is very, very unique, and very few companies in the world have these policies. We believe in continuous growth. We give people responsibility very, very early. We promote purely from within, right? So we don't go to a fancy business schools. and hire people from there to manage our operations. We actually grow all of our talent from within. We promote based on meritocracy. Basically, it's your own merit and what you do that gets promoted to the next step. It's not about who you know. It's not about what you know. It's about what you can get done in a context of business. And we also have a continuous learning mindset, right? So since joining Schlumberger, I have attended probably 40 different courses, some of them in leading universities around the world. Some of it is self-learning, but nonetheless, it's something that we do all the time. You always keep learning. And last but not the least is performance matters. So you remember I talked a little bit about meritocracy earlier and how you move from point A to point B. But at the end of the day, performance and potential are based on a career and the reward that comes with it. And obviously, considering that we are playing in the field that we are playing in, we have very competitive compensation and benefits packages for prospective employees. Now, I started talking about this energy trilemma, right? Energy security, energy affordability, and energy sustainability, or the need to decarbonize. And the challenge of this problem is that it is extremely difficult to have all three of these things at the same time. We as humans do not have technology today that can cover all three of those in order to be able to have this so-called great balancing act. And this is exactly why we as a company believe that this is an opportunity for us to actually help in decarbonizing, while at the same time ensuring that energy security, the energy needs of the world are met. And I will show you here in just a minute on how we are going to do that. Now, I introduced this concept of this carbon curve earlier. And this actually was first officially publicized during the COP21 event that took place in November of 2015 in Paris. This is when, for the first time ever, vast majority of the countries in the world, all but 3 at a time, have actually decided to ratify something which was very, very important. And that is to slow down warming of the earth and basically cap it up to 1.5 degrees C by the year 2030, which now, by the way, is just around the corner. And what that means is that for many, many companies, that we need to get to net zero. You remember I talked about that earlier, that everything we do, we need to basically find ways to reduce, to reuse, to recycle, to reinvest, whatever it takes in order to slow this down. The problem with this curve is that our energy hunger keeps increasing all the time. And it's increasing for 2 very basic reasons. One is human population is increasing. In the next 20 years, we are expected to go from 8 billion people to 10 billion. That's about 25% increase. At the same time, the energy usage per human is also increasing. So in the same 20 years, that our world's population is going to increase by approximately 25%, the energy usage or need is going to increase by 50%, right? So this is exactly where this becomes really, really tricky. This is no longer just an issue of us wanting to do the right thing, but also how do you do it, right? Because of the fact that population keeps increasing and that average usage of energy per capita, if you would, is also increasing. And what we basically have to do as humanity is we need to remove many, many, many gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere and from the current industrial processes in order to achieve that. So let me just give you one number. During COVID pandemic, when the world kind of stopped, right? There was a period of time and planes were not flying, many people were not going to work, the usage of energy has drastically reduced. During that year, we managed to reduce basically carbon output by about 1.4 gigatons per year. In order for us to cap the 1.5 degrees C warming by 2030, we had to do this every year between now and 2030. And yet we all know that COVID is not going to happen again, hopefully. So this is really kind of where this challenge becomes even greater, right? So what we need to do is we need to expedite everything that we do. Now, all of this is going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of coordination between different people, between different industries, and we all have a role to play. Now, what my company is doing is attacking this complex problem with various solutions. The complex problems will never be fixed with a silver bullet, meaning with one or two items that are just miraculously going to basically solve it all. Because if it was that simple, we humans would have done it already. I'm not going to go and talk about all of these little boxes here on the blue, but I do want to talk about a couple of them. The first one is I want to talk about oil and gas. Oil and gas today provides 60% of all the energy demands for the world. This number is not going to change significantly. Oil and gas is not going anywhere. In fact, in the next 20 years, despite all the efforts that are happening in the world to bring greener, more sustainable energies like solar, like wind, like electrical vehicles on the road, the dependence from oil and gas is only going to decrease from about 60% to about 50% in the next 20 years, right? So oil and gas will remain, but it needs to be a part of the solution because there are ways for us with our technological experience, advancements, and of course the money that we have in banks to actually help the world to decarbonize. One of the things that my company is doing today is we're introducing something what's called autonomous operations in our day-to-day way of things. So you remember the slide where I have showed you what the offshore operation looks like. So when you look at the drilling platform, you'll have about 200 people living and working in one of those. They normally go for 2-week hitches. You normally work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You are there basically for 2 weeks. You work non-stop, right? You work for 12 hours, then you rest for 12 hours, and it goes like that, right? So obviously by reducing the number of the people from 200 to 100 or 50 is going to have a tremendous impact on carbon footprint, right? Because there's going to be less people taking boats, helicopters, planes to get there, less people to feed, right? So in the last several years, we have been investing tremendous amount of money in this. We keep investing in it, and we are consistently reducing the number. The last point that I really want to talk about is something what's called carbon capture, utilization and storage, right? So we have a lot of CO2 in atmosphere. There are technologies that are being developed that are capturing this carbon. They are converting it into the liquid form and then injecting it back into the ground. And where are we injecting it? We are injecting it in the old oil and gas reservoirs that have been depleted, right? So once again, an example where the technology can be used to actually reduce the CO2 that's already emitted and to be injected back into the ground. Now, I'm going to finalize it by giving those of you that are students or potentially young professionals today a few tips about how to make it in career. These tips are purely based on my own experience, and first and foremost, be ambitious. Ambition is extremely important. It's not something that your parents can give to you, that your grandparents can give to you. You have to work on this yourself. And you should always, always challenge yourself to go beyond the limits. The second point, which is extremely important, is to be humble. And you have to remember that any organization that you join, it is never going to be about one individual or even a small group of people. It's always going to be about the team. Sometimes that team could be only a couple of people, but many times it could be hundreds or even thousands of people that make things work. The third one is to be open to change. There is a saying, proverb, that's many thousands of years old, by Greek philosopher called Heraclius, who basically said that the change is the only constant. And that's exactly the way things are, right? The new opportunities could be waiting. The doors that you hoped you're going to get in might close. The new doors will open. The companies will evolve all the time. They'll be changing the rules of the game, and you have to be willing to change with those times. You can't be stuck in past. The fourth, never stop learning. It's great to see that you're all here this morning because it's clear that you have ambition and it's clear that you want to learn. This is why you're here this morning and not sleeping in after being in a pub till 3 o'clock in the morning today, right? But make sure that when you stop being a student, that you do not stop learning, right? And last but not the least, never ever give up. Don't be discouraged by things that might happen in your life, especially things you have no control over. Okay? Keep going. There'll be a day when you're going to take 1 step forward, 3 steps back, but trust me, cumulatively over time, if you do not give up, you're going to have many more days where you're taking actually many more steps forward rather than steps back. And with that, thank you for being here with us this morning. I apologize for some technical difficulties we had. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Sorry for the inconvenience earlier. So now we have our Q&A session. We have around 10 minutes for your questions. So please.
Finally get my hands on a microphone. Alan, thank you for a great presentation. Very inspirational towards the end, and I'm glad that you tied your career into some career tips at the end. What I'm interested in, I guess, your opinion, because this is a very controversial way forward, You recall several years ago, Australia introduced the carbon tax. I'm not
Yes.
sure if you remember. And then a new government came in and revoked the carbon tax because it wasn't good for the economy. There's always this balance between staying economically competitive in the marketplace versus making sure that the planet doesn't go to hell. How do corporations like yours, in light of staying competitive in the marketplace, deal with the pressures of also decarbonizing and making sure that you stay on top of your game? And I guess the second follow-up to question to that is, how do we ensure that despite the best efforts from corporations like yours and certain countries that want to lead the way, actually motivate countries that are less in a position to be able to decarbonize at the speed that perhaps some of these more advanced economies are able to do that?
Those are great questions. And it is, I would say, one of the dilemmas within dilemma that I introduced. At the end of the day, privately owned corporations, they need to thrive commercially and economically in order to be able to invest into technologies in general. In our particular case, we as a company fully understand that the global warming is a real threat. It's a fact, and there's something that we need to do about it. Now, being a technology company in our heart and soul, we also see this as a big business opportunity. Because at the end of the day, the companies that will find gadgets and solutions that will decarbonize will be able to monetize that, right? So from that perspective, we don't have a concern that this investment at this point in time is not going to pay the dividends over time. Now, to answer your second question, and this for me personally, I think it's even a bigger of a challenge, because when you talk about sustainability in general, it is a topic that is talked about in certain parts of the world quite a bit, in some parts of the world less so, and then in another parts of the world not at all. And I'll give you a perfect example. I often travel to Africa, and I never ever have discussions with my customers there and the governments there around that topic, because 43% of their population can't even cook their next meal or cup of coffee in the morning because they have no access to electricity, to something as basic as that, right? So I would say when it comes to understanding and adoption, they are not, I would say, priority in the short to medium term. Now, where we really need to spend tremendous amount of time is educating those that can afford it to change their behaviors and to invest. Because, you know, many countries use energy at a different levels, and as a result, they emit, of course, CO2 at a completely different levels, right? And I think this is really where the focus needs to be. We really have to go after those that emit the most per capita, those that can afford it, while at the same time creating opportunities for them to bring returns back to their shareholders, right? Because like you said it, if you can't justify the return to shareholders, this is just going to be one of those nice things you put in your annual report every year, but it's not going to be something that's continuous and it's going to be there for a while. The carbon credits trading is a way to go, right? I think many companies today, especially in oil and gas industry, will probably use that as a very, very last resort, while they are, in the meantime, genuinely attempting to basically solve the problem by utilization of technology. And this is, once again, why I strongly believe that, oil and gas plays a vital role in solving that problem. You know, saying that, you know, we should stop using all oil and gas tomorrow is not going to solve our problem. In fact, it's going to create even more problem in the short to medium term.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, first of all, thank you for the talk. It's really interesting. My question is about the renewable resources and the renewable energy. As you probably know, Iceland is a country that produces and uses 100% of renewable energy.
Yes.
However, they are labeled as very eco-unfriendly country because of their high footprint, carbon high footprint. So my question is the problem of the global warming and everything in energy production or energy usage? And are renewable sources actually eco-friendly to the world because of their production or usage and, you know, everything?
Yeah. Fundamental problem is in emission. It's not about what you're producing or what you're using, it's what you're emitting. Now, this is where the science gets a bit fuzzy. Not necessarily because science is bad or because we don't know about it, but because different people like to use and quote different numbers, right? And this is, I think, why is it important that we are all educated on these topics, that governments go after and support things that will reduce the overall emission, right? There's a lot of great ideas out there. You know, I'm all for green energies, for solar, for wind, for geothermal. They're all fantastic. The problem that we have is we can't scale them up fast enough, right? Today, when you take all three of these, they are still 5-6% of the total energy need. And for you to go from 5-6% to, let's say, 60%, which is where oil and gas is today, that's going to take many, many, many decades, and we might not even get there. And back to your point, just because we are calling it green and sustainable, you know, when you do the math on what it takes to produce a kilogram of lithium hydroxide that is being used to manufacture lithium batteries for EV vehicles. And when you start doing the CO2 footprint of that, because that comes from, you know, open mines in places like Chile and Argentina, where you're also consuming tremendous amount of fresh water, right? Because what you do for dilution there is, you know, you pump ton of water from the lithium-rich brines, and then you know, let it sit in pools for years so that water can evaporate and you can get a bigger concentrate, right? Again, what is the environmental impact of that? What is the CO2 impact of that? So I think at the end of the day, once again, this is why this is such a complex problem that requires a complex solutions, not solutions. There'll be many of them. And this is why I strongly believe that for generation of the kids that are in front of us today, for those of you that are in your teens and 20s, this is really going to be one of the biggest problems you're going to be faced. But rest assured that there's a lot of companies out there like SLB that are more than willing to actually help out in more ways than one.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. I'm not sure that we will be able to take any more questions, but I'm sure that you'll stick around. So if you have any questions, you can ask Mr. Corak after it. So thank you for the presentation. And now I will invite our team to set up the stage for the next session. So thank you so much.